Good morning, everyone, and welcome once again every week to our amazing JNForever family on Zoom. I hope everyone's doing okay. You know, we are always here to support you and keep you motivated and inspired. As you all know by now, you're probably sick of hearing my voice, but you know I'm jackiec. I'm the Legacy Manager for JNF Victoria, and this is what I do, and leaving a bequest is the most benevolent and meaningful thing that a person could consider doing for generations to come, for grandchildren. And I'm always available for a chat. We can walk around a park within 5 kilometers and before 9 p.m. at night, unless anyone wants to go later. So I'm always available for a chat. You all know the rules. We are on mute for the time being. Sorry, a bit of a frog. And if anyone wants to ask a question, there will be time at the end, or please feel free to put your questions on the chat and we will definitely get to them at the end. And now I'm so proud once again to introduce the incredible Professor Lisa Jackson Pulver AM. I'm even more proud of the fact that I can call her Lisa and that she's agreed on short notice after an impassioned email from me with that prayer emoji. Please come and give us some of your insight and your wisdom on yet another topic. And she just has this unique and effortless ability to tap into so many relevant and current issues from her own enormous academic pool of resources. It is quite extraordinary, and I'm so grateful to you for your time. So for those of you who don't know, and for those who do, let me refresh. Professor Lisa Jackson Pulver AM is a specialist epidemiologist. Is that the correct pronunciation?
You've done great. Yeah, everyone knows what an epidemiologist is now too, which is a bit weird.
The public health. She's currently the Deputy Vice-Chancellor, Indigenous Strategy and Services at the University of Sydney. She's a visionary educator who went on to hold the inaugural chair of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Health and is director of the Muru-Mari Indigenous Health Unit. She was instrumental in developing an Indigenous master elective and an eventual master public health stream. During this time, she engaged vigorously with many communities and organizations to develop a series of residential scholarship programs. Professor Jackson Pulver is a member of the Australian Medical Council and director on its board. In addition, she's a member of the Australian Statistical Advisory Council and the South Australian Health Performance Council. And if that were not enough, she serves in the Royal Australian Air Force Specialist Reserve and has moved through the ranks from her initial commission as Flight Lieutenant to her current rank of Group Captain. Lisa is an Orthodox convert to Judaism, a keen supporter of the Jewish community, and a tireless advocate for public health, research, and educational opportunities for all. I also saw a few days ago on LinkedIn that you had just donated blood for the 120th time.
Yes.
That is a lot of blood. That is an enormous, that is a lot of blood. Well, that got me moving. And the very next day I was at the blood bank with my arm out and my vein ready. And you inspire, you just inspire. What can I say? So here to talk about leadership in the context of COVID, I give you Professor Lisa Jackson Pulver.
Yay. Hello, everybody. What an introduction. I'm so proud of you for going off and giving blood. I've posted that and I'm amazed at how many people have gone, oh, yeah, I can do that. Because it is actually an act that we can do in COVID. The blood bank is an essential service here in Australia, and they're desperate. They're desperate for your plasma. They're desperate for your whole blood. And for those who are eligible for their platelets. So please don't be shy about doing it. They would be incredibly grateful if you're eligible to do so. As is our way, we always pay respects to traditional owners of country. I know that you know that I'm here in Sydney in our 8-week of lockdown, not quite met where you guys were last year, but I have no doubt we'll soon be way past that. And I'm on Gadigal land, and the Gadigal people were are the people of the immediate coastal area of Sydney. Looks after the primary Sydney people. It's 29 different groups that are part of the Greater Eora Nation, which is the nation that is basically the area that's Greater Sydney. So to the north to the Hawkesbury, down to the south to the Georges River, to the west to the Nepean River, and of course to the east to our beautiful ocean and our beautiful beaches. So I recognise that you're all coming from different lands and countries down there in Victoria, and there might even be some people from elsewhere as well. I'd also like to pay respects to all of your ancestors. You know, becoming a Jewish person, you know, by choice. I didn't have to convert to marry my beautiful husband, but I chose to convert. So there were no arguments about how we brought up our children. It was interesting because as I got more into Judaism, I started to learn a lot more about how Jews connect to country and how the land is so critically important, and that there was always this beautiful life cycle. And when I went to Israel for the first time as a Jew, which was my third trip to Israel, by the way, I was absolutely fascinated by farming practices. And I was absolutely fascinated by allowing land to go fallow cyclically, so that that land can recover in a natural way. So it doesn't have to continually produce, that there is a rest time. And I was always fascinated by that thought. And these are very old practices, you know, in the same way as hygiene is a very, very old practice. And going back to your ancestors, mine by choice, but yours by heritage, and my husband's ancestors, I'm absolutely fascinated by the extraordinary knowledge of your peoples, and I pay respects to them. You know, that must be said. And I recognise the absolute genius of generations of intelligence that is around the room now. So thank you so much. And yes, I rarely say no to Jackie. You know, she's one of those people, a bit of a force of nature. I'm not telling any of you anything new. And so when she asks me to do something, I do my very, very best to make that happen. You know, I respect her and I like her very much, but I also know that people are looking to share. I think now more than ever, as we go in and out of these incredibly difficult times, when you think about what's been happening for a while, we as a nation have been in drought. We as a nation suffered terrible, terrible fires. We as a nation then went into COVID, and then we as a nation kind of thought we were getting out the other end. And then, of course, you know, vaccination rollouts, you know, whatever. But here we are with a terrible variant, and it's really, I think, probably a more difficult lockdown for our nation than it was before. And I know a lot of people have been saying that. But I think it's different in a few different ways. Firstly, is that I think we used up our emotional and spiritual resources last year. Through it. I think we all made a promise. I'm sorry, these things just don't fit very well when you wear hearing aids. You know, these. I think we used up all of our emotional resources last year, thinking that we'd never have to go into this again. If we behaved ourselves, stayed locked down, then this thing would somehow just dissipate until we all got vaccinated, and it will be just go into a place of being like the common flu. And I think part of that is also that we see so many around us that used up their financial and economic resources as well. So what little or what resources people may have saved up for their international trip to New Zealand, or you know, to go overseas for their holiday, they utilised that when they lost their jobs or lost their ships or had to find ways of being able to purchase new electronic equipment so that they could homeschool the kids. You know, like all of these things started to change for people. And I think when we went into the shutdown this year, it just stretched and challenged people beyond what I think they were able to do. And when you look at what's happening at the moment, you know, as you know, I'm in the Air Force, and of course, there are many of us who have got connections to military here and abroad, and you know, it's incredibly distressing to see what 2 decades of effort have resulted in just a matter of days with the Taliban and Afghanistan, and what that means for us as a world. How do we march forward? Do we need to really have a very serious think about what do we do when we're provisioning international engagement in the way that we did 20 years ago? What does that look like for the future? And what does leadership look like? You know, we've had some massive challenges, and I think all of this is coming home to roost as we're sitting here in this crazy COVID world. So I thought I might talk a little bit about what leadership is and where it is and how it operates, and how I think a lot of us are questioning leadership. What is the paradigm of leadership? What is the role we have into leadership, and who are we as leaders? You know, we're all women. Most of us are women on this call. There are many men here as well, but the only pictures I can see on the screen are of women. And so I'm sure there's some blokes there. But what does that mean for us as you know, fairly empowered people? You know, many of us have got, you know, we're sitting in a comfortable home. We're not sharing with 4 families. Many of us are a little bit older, and we're not homeschooling small kids whilst we're trying to deal with toddlers. And, you know, we've got means. We've, on the whole, got refrigerators that are full of fresh food, and we don't have to fuss about having the aircon on and keeping us nice and warm or nice and cool. So how does leadership look for us in the context of so much around us that doesn't have those kinds of quite modest advantages for many, but are seen nonetheless as advantages? Because when you don't have the basics, then your world changes a lot. And in Australia at the moment, our world is changing a lot. So I thought I'd touch on that and have a yarn about that. And then I thought at about past, I might stop talking. And because I know you'll probably have a few comments that you want to make, so that we can, oh, look, I see a bloke who's just appeared on my primary screen. It's nice. I'm moving. So, you know, I just think that this could be a multi-way conversation. I know it's really hard to have a conversation on, you know, on these things, but I'm getting better at it. And I think many of us are getting better at it as well. So if that's okay, I might just start talking about leadership in the context of who we are as individuals. And I know that you're all drawing on extreme resources in your own lives. Provisioning, of course, opportunities to reach out to others. I heard Jackie saying, you know, if anyone wants to have a walk without 5 kilometres, and that's there. And that's a very powerful thing to offer. And I know many of you are making those offers to others. In my world, I've started, because I run a large portfolio in a big university, and I've got people that I don't really know who, you know, eventually I'm their boss through the system. And so I've got people that are at most entry level of a university at the beginning of their careers, some of whom have never stepped foot on campus, you know, some of them who have been put into their roles and orientated to the system online, all the way through to senior research academics. So I've taken to just doing a bit of a lottery and creating a little random generator of numbers against all the names of the people in my portfolio, and I make a point of ringing 6 of them a day out of the blue, and just to say hello. And I commonly get the, oh my God, what have I done wrong? You know? But it's not that, but you know, it means the world to people when they're not expecting a call from you, for you to ring up, not for work, but just to check out how they're going, talk about them. You know, and the importance of having a couple of conversation triggers as well can be very useful. It's an extremely good activity, I think, for someone who's fundamentally shy and not good at small talk, which I'm fundamentally shy and not good at small talk. So it's a wonderful thing. Look, the second thing that I've seen people doing of late is this whole program around things called random acts of kindness. So there's a young woman down the road from me. She's very pregnant, right? She fell pregnant during lockdown last year. And of course, we're in lockdown now, so she can't have a midwife suite birth now. She's going to a hospital to deliver her baby that is fundamentally lurking in a code red situation. And her waters haven't broken. She's a week overdue. And the whole neighbourhood has just been putting things on her front doorstep, like bits of fruit, and other little kids have been drawing pictures to welcome the new baby in when she finally decides to arrive. She's, I think, about 10 days late now, so it's getting to the point of something drastic having to happen. But having those sorts of random acts of kindness where people just give, or just reach out, or just bang on a door, or just say hello, I think are really important. And they are micro acts of leadership. Other micro acts of leadership that I have been witnessing have been for someone like, we've got our chief health officers. We know what they look like. We see them every day at 11sies. And it's quite compelling reading for some of us, or watching for some of us. And I have no idea what the 11sies are going to be, but I'm getting a whole stack of messages on my phone, so no doubt it'll be something of interest to me. But one thing that I was told is that Dr. Kerry Chant, our Chief Health Officer, has been receiving enormous numbers of cards and messages and bunches of flowers and boxes of chocolates and optometrist appointments so that she can have her glasses repaired. A few weeks ago, her glasses broke and she just put on these broken glasses trying to read the numbers for the day. And when we look at our public figures and the giganormous pressure that they're under, it's very easy to criticise them, really super easy to criticise them. But ultimately, they're human beings that are doing a tremendously difficult job. And right now, that job doesn't look to end anytime soon. So these are micro acts of leadership when an individual picks up a pen or writes a note or issues a good work to an individual. These are micro acts. And I would ask you to think about doing those, particularly for public figures that are copping a lot of flack at the moment. I know your Premier, you know, we can go on the good things about him and the bad things about him, but ultimately he's getting there. And these people are fronting up every day to press conferences. Many of those press conferences are open, where they have no idea of what the questions are going to be. They have a sense of some of them, but you know, ultimately there can be random questions. So this is a giganormous amount of stress for individuals. So I ask you to consider what can you do to help people know that you're actually on side. You may not agree with their politics, or you may not agree with what they sometimes do, but you know, the recognition of a job that they're doing, which is one that none of us are in, and I think the vast majority of us are very happy we don't have. The other thing that I wanted to talk to as well was the act of stating something about your health. I know a lot of people are shy about sharing whether or not they've had the vaccine. And I'm happy to talk about that in the second part of this chat. But one thing I'd advise you and ask you to do is that if you have had your vaccines, it would be really cool if you could share that information with others in your family and communities that you know haven't had the vaccines or are reticent about the vaccines. I know that vaccine reticence is going down as this outbreak is really clinging into us. But sometimes people get a little bit frightened of having the vaccine because of the rare side effects, and they are incredibly rare. Sometimes people worry about having the vaccine because they think that this time will pass and that having everyone else around them vaccinated will be protection for them. And that's actually how vaccines work. Having the vast majority of us vaccinated will protect those who are vulnerable. But the thing is it needs to be all of us who are able to have a vaccine, to have the vaccine. There are some people in our communities that can't have vaccines. They have medical reasons for not so doing. They might be immunocompromised. They might be undergoing treatment for certain medical conditions and they can't have them. They're the people we need to protect. At the moment, our children are most vulnerable, our little wee kids. Last year, you'll remember that we had the schools open and we were able, well, in New South Wales we certainly did, and I know for some of the time in Victoria you did as well. And we were able to send the kids off school, and that relieved a lot of pressure on families who had to work from home, and for first responders and frontline responders. And it's interesting, now those schools are actually the very place that we're deeply worried about, because we can't get jabs into arms of little kids. We haven't got enough evidence at the moment to know what the efficacy and the safety of those vaccines are. So the onus is really going to be on all of us to step up to protect our next generations. When the outbreak first happened, some of the messaging we were getting into Aboriginal communities, and I know this is happening in the Jewish community too, was to look after our elders. You know, they're our story holders, they're our historians, they're the ones that tell us who we are at the end of the day. And that's still an important message, but now it's about, now we've got to really pay attention to the little ones, because they are our future. They're the ones that are going to get us out of this as they grow up and become strong, and as we all pass away, you know, our world will pass on to them to deal with. So, you know, these are quite important issues. And again, a micro-active leadership can make all the difference in the world to someone else's decision. And just know it is still at this point in time in our culture here, in our society of Australia, that this is not a mandated thing for the general public. But I think it's something that we do need to make a very strong, conscious decision about. In my world, something very strange happened yesterday. I am an epidemiologist, and part of my history, for those of you who don't know, is that I started life as a nurse. I went off and lived in a hospital and learned to become a nurse and got a certificate in nursing, and then I went off to medical school and I did all the preclinical medicine, and I thought the last thing I want to do is look down people's throats and issue them, you know, work certificates for a few days off work or something. And I found public health, and I went off and did a public health degree and became an epidemiologist, you know. And, you know, usually 2 years ago, I'd say, oh, I'm an epidemiologist, and people would say quite innocently, oh, is that about skin? You know, epidermis. So anyhow, but no one ever says that anymore. And I sort of miss those days, you know, where I'd say, no, it's not about skin, it's about infectious diseases. Yeah, because now everyone knows what it is. And there's so many people who think they're epidemiologists, which is absolutely fascinating. I watch TV at night, you know, and you've got people who are sociologists giving epidemiological advice. And I think, oh, I'm glad I worked all those years. But anyhow, but, where was I going with that? Oh, yeah. So the health system is under such stress at the moment, and this is really important, again, as a active micro-leadership, is that you must look after your health. You must stay well. You must not get sick right now. And there's a few reasons for that. One is that our hospitals are under shocking stress, as you can probably see on the news. But the second thing is that many of the staff in the hospitals haven't had a break for 18 months. And they're pretty tired. Many staff are exposed and having to go into furlough. And so what's happening is that many of the private hospitals now are no longer, oh, I've got this around the wrong, could be why they're full. No. I have no idea how to use these things. Yeah, so you've got so many staff that are coming in from the private hospital system to work in the the public hospital systems, because they're the ones that are taking the bulk of the COVID challenges. But just yesterday, all of us who are like third line responders, you know, way back here, have now been asked to get our vaccinators certificates, so that pretty soon you'll start seeing Professor Poopars in the lines doing swabs and jabs. And that's how seriously all of our governments are taking getting vaccines into people's arms, when they go off and send a letter to someone like me to go off and do a course to reacquaint myself with the role of giving vaccines. I'm a damn good needle giver, by the way. I always got compliments from my patients when I gave them jabs of things. But you know, this is quite serious and quite important. And I think that now that people like me are now coming towards the front line to provision services to help our broader community, it does mean something quite different. So if you know any first-line responders in your families, or if you yourself are a first-line responder, I thank you from the bottom of my heart, and I would love you to reach out to them and just just say hello to them and, you know, just give them the gift of a bit of love, because they are pretty tired. And they're handing over to people like me, which would probably worry a few of them, but, you know, I'm not too worried. Just saying. So, yeah, so times are changing. Our world is making, you know, some quite challenging inroads. Of course, at the same time, we're looking at issues that are happening in remote communities, in Aboriginal communities, in country towns. We've had some, I won't use that word, we've had some very uninformed people and selfish people do roadshows whilst being COVID positive and spreading the disease in many communities that have no resistance and no defences. Not just because they're communities that have got lots and lots of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people in them, but because many of those communities do not have health services, do not have access to health services. And if people start getting crook in those communities, the ability to be able to transfer them to a major city hospital that is full becomes quite less. So the consequences are quite different. So again, you know, it's these are the challenges that people are facing. These are the challenges that the communities are facing. And this is all people in our communities. And so when you're thinking about if you, and I know that I can talk like this with you because you're a caring community, is that if you are revising who you give money to at the moment, I'm not talking about your bequests because, you know, that's a different story, but if you are revising what you're giving to at the moment, can you please think very carefully about some real-time money going into organisations in our communities that are outside of the major cities, into our food banks, into our Oz harvests, into these sorts of programs, because at the moment they're not well provisioned. And the further you get out of the centre of your city, the harder it is for people to be able to provision food packages and to be able to provision basic medical supplies and other supports. So these are just opportunities for you, again, to express, you know, your self-agency in your own micro leadership. And so we're getting close to the half hour now, and I did promise that I might be able to answer some questions or have a two-way or 140-way discussion here. So over to you, Jackie, to facilitate. I'll try and find the comments page. 73 of us. It's nice to see you all.
Oh, wonderful. Would anyone like to ask a question or add a comment or anything? And if so, just raise your hand or unmute yourself and just, you know, give your name so we know who's speaking, and we can answer the question.
Jack and Eleanor.
Unmute. Yes, Lisa, you mentioned in regards to helping in those, can you hear me?
Not so well.
Not so well. I'll try and speak into the microphone. That's better. Okay. Yes, you mentioned as regards to helping in the communities, remote communities, regarding this COVID problem. And how would we go about doing that? In a practical way, how could we help?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Most remote communities have got Aboriginal land councils. They have got community councils, and some of them have very small health councils. There are a number of really cool organisations that have been helping and supporting communities for many years that are charitable institutions, and therefore your donations can work twice as hard, right, because you get a benefit of that. So, for example, if you have a look at Aboriginal community-controlled health organisations and NACCHO, N-A-C-C-H-O, the National Aboriginal Community-Controlled Health Organisation, as well as the Aboriginal Peak Body Organisation that's headed up at the moment by in Canberra by oh, goodness gracious me, her name has just completely escaped me. They have got a charitable status and they are able to get rapid responses into community of need at the moment, particularly for medical supplies, but also for food. So anything that's charitable, anything that has got one of those tax deductible numbers against it, and if it comes from an Aboriginal community controlled organisation, then that's definitely where I'd be paying attention. Things like many of the rural fire services, I'm told by colleagues, military colleagues of mine who are currently delivering food parcels, many of them are coming from food runs that are being done by the rural fire brigades. Which is absolutely fantastic. They got a lot of stores of canned and non-perishable food last year, or the year before last now, for the bushfires, etc., to help communities recover. And so they're distributing a lot of those resources at the moment as well. So there's a couple of practical ways that you can do it. There's, of course, always Oz Harvest. They're always up for getting donations of money, as well as, of course, food under certain prescribed practices to get into communities. There's also a Jewish group that goes into remote communities that is run by one of the Chabad groups, and they do very, very large road shows. And then finally, for medical, for dental services and other services for children, there's groups like the POCHE Centre, POCHE, Australia-wide groups, again working intently with remote communities that might be able to do with, with any donation, modest or great. So thanks for that question. That was good. Thanks, Jack.
So the Aboriginal Peak Body, that's the name of it in Canberra?
Yeah, National Aboriginal Community Controlled Health Organisation.
Okay, thank you.
If you tap in NACCHO, you'll get it. But there's also another group that is representing all of the peaks. And I'll remember her name before the end of this. I will remember her name. I'm so sorry. How embarrassing. I speak to her every week on the telephone, so don't tell her. Yeah, and so they run a large peak. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Lisa.
It's my pleasure.
Anybody else? There was a question from Hilary Ash. The question was how to engage with those who would, we say anti-vax, but how would you engage with anti-vax people or people that have got a different view, I'd say, on vaccination? And I'm interested in that as well, because I think it is controversial, and you often land up in these arguments, and then it's just one of those.
Oh, it's so tricky, isn't it? I get a bit of hate mail. I get quite a lot of hate mail. In fact, I don't actually look at a lot of the mail I get in my inbox. Other people look at my inbox and then give me the stuff I can read, because it's really depressing, some of the things that people say. So ultimately, I think there are three groups of people. There are those who are fiercely anti-vaxxer and nothing you can do can change their minds, okay? Don't engage with them. Just agree to have your view, agree to let them have their view. They pose a danger to themselves and society, and sometimes it's not worthwhile. But the ones that I think are worth working through with are those who feel as though they've done their own research and they've come to their own conscious decision. So I was in a Woolworths the other day, masked up and just going in to get my bits and then coming back out. And I heard a woman speaking very loudly in the aisle, and she said, "No, I've done my own research. I'm an independent human being. I can make my own decisions. I'm not going to have the government tell me what I can put into my body. I'll wear the masks. I want to pay the fine, but I'm not going to have this thing. I've done my own research." She kept saying this, and I went up to her and I said, "Excuse me, hi, you're a researcher?" And she said, yes, I've done my own research anyhow. Basically what she had done is that she subscribed to the Truth About Vaccines type website, and all of the stuff that was on there was very much a very alternative view of vaccines, about the idea of micro robots being injected into your body. And even though not all vaccines have these micro robots, they they reprogram your DNA and they turn your DNA into something different that can then be stimulated another time by a third party to do bad or to do other things. So this is what the vaccine thing is about. So that was her research, and I was able to say to her, I said, "Oh, that's absolutely fascinating stuff." I said, "Can I please ask you to have a look at some other websites as well? Can I ask you to have a look at, so and I had a couple of websites in my back pocket that was all associated with New South Wales Health Department. And at the time, and I think they're still up, there were a number of videos of people who were sick in hospital. And one of them was this guy who was on heavy oxygen therapy, and he took his mask off and he said, I didn't believe in the vaccines because I thought it was bad to inject something into my body. But I tell you what, having this come into my body is even worse. Please get your vaccine." Right? So they're the ones I would engage with, those that feel as though they've done their own research, check the research that they've done, invite them to just, do a little bit more and come to another conclusion. I've found out where she lives, and I do walk past there every couple of days, and I'm hoping to bump into her again so I could see how she went with her research. But I think that's quite important. Then, of course, there's the third group of people that worry about the vaccine on them because they're really fixated on the side effects. And, there was a time when the side effects were being repeatedly front page news and headline news, when you wouldn't find that kind of headline front page news on any other drug. Like you take statins, or many of us take statins. There are lots of side effects to those. The likelihood of having a side effect with statins is much higher than getting a side effect from particular jabs, right? So it's really about recognising that there are side effects to everything, and the side effect of COVID-19 Delta variant in extreme cases is death. So I reckon that's a side effect that we can live without, and I'd prefer to live with the challenge of the side effects. Now, most of the side effects with Astra are now very well documented, and we have very good fixes for them. And so there are, if you have an Astra vaccine and within a certain time period with particular side effects and certain kinds of headaches, etc., you present to your local casualty unit. You say, I've had Astra in the last 4 days. I've got a stinking headache. I can't shift. You will receive an immediate care, and you will receive some drugs that will reverse that. Okay, so we do have treatments for the side effects. In fact, a very good friend of mine had her AstraZeneca vaccine. She was holding out for one of the others, but she ended up going to AstraZeneca, and she rang me up a couple of days later and she said, I've got this headache, I can't shift. And I said, what do you mean you got a headache, you can't shift? Oh, just terrible headache. I just feel sick. And I said, okay, go to the hospital. Just march off to the hospital right now. And she did. She was admitted for 2 days. She was rehydrated. She was given some therapy, and she's absolutely fine and dandy. And she's getting ready for her second shot. She will be getting a different vaccine this time. But these side effects do exist, and we do know what to do with them. So they're the three primary groups. So there are those that, don't engage with because there's nothing on heaven and earth that, will change their opinion. Those who have done their own research, invite them to have a look at some additional stuff. And the third that are just waiting for a better option. I'm afraid the tipping time has come. Delta is in our community, and the effects of Delta far outweigh, the poor effects of Delta far outweigh, the effects of having a jab. And then, of course, there's lots of people like me that are absolute advocates, and, I do believe in vaccines. When I was a young nurse, I actually had some people who were teenagers that had polio as children, and they'd been on iron lung machines for years and years and years. So, the effects of vaccine make a massive difference, So for those of you who can remember diphtheria and polio, these are vaccines. These are, they've become very safe over the years, and we barely think about it, when you think about it. So thank you for that question. We've got quite a few questions coming in now, which is good.
There's a few questions. Is there anyone else that just wants to ask? I think we've got time for another one or two, depending on your time.
Yeah, Adrian's waving away there. Hello, Adrian. It's lovely to see you.
Where is Adrian?
No, he's midway down my script and he's off mute now. How's that? Good on you.
Those of you who watched Q&A last Thursday would have seen me on that program. I asked a question with regard to the in-effect of long-term lockdowns. I'm not going to discuss that at this point in time, but I still believe that natural immunity for children is probably better as they don't experience the disease to the same degree that adults do. All adults should be, over the age of puberty, should be vaccinated ASAP. My question, Lisa, is alternative treatments and prevention of the COVID-19 virus. Ivermectin's been sort of thrown around a lot and hasn't been approved, and whether it works or not is questionable. But things like opaganib, which is being developed in Israel, what's the circumstances as far as that's concerned as a definite treatment for people with the disease?
Yeah, so firstly, I just need to disagree with you respectfully about the effects on children. We have had children die of Delta variant. Okay, if we were back last year, then you're right, no worries. But nowadays, it is heavily affecting children. And the second issue with that is that we don't know what the effect of long-tail COVID will look like in the young. Okay, so we just need to be careful of that. With regards to the various treatments and long-term effects, I haven't been following a lot of the research about the what you've talked about with the with the alternative treatments and some of the stuff that was espoused in the United States last year, is that when someone gets COVID and they enter into a hospital, there are a variety of different treatments pending what other conditions they may or may not have. And the utilisation of heavy-duty steroids, for example, is certainly one of those. There's a lot of medical treatments around to keep lung capacity going, notwithstanding the other treatments that people would be having should they need to be on long-term respirators. So, you know, I think it's tricky. There's a lot of attention being paid to research into a variety of drug therapies. If there is a natural solution to stuff, then that always ends up being better than, you know, a more synthetic solution, I guess, but not always. You know, I think it depends on the circumstances. And right now, I think the planet is at an existential crisis for a few things, notwithstanding the climate and sustainability of food. But most importantly now is that COVID is one of those diseases, those viruses that shows us how able it is to change. So as it learns how to be more resilient and more dangerous, and it's not a conscious thing, so I'm not suggesting there's any consciousness behind the COVID, but this is a virus and it naturally mutates, it naturally changes, it naturally adjusts, and it just so happens that it's adjusted into a far more dangerous form. It wasn't originally transmitted by aerosol or through the air. It is now. And you can walk past someone within a metre of them and breathe in what they've just expired. And you know, we've found that here in Sydney, that people can get it from that. And we don't know what the next generation of this will look like and whether Delta will go into a more dangerous form or whether it will go into a more less dangerous form. But you can guarantee until the world has vaccinated against it and transmission rates are way low, which is below that magic figure of 1, then, you know, we just have to expect more mutations. So novel drug therapies are coming out by the hour. And that brings me to another thing, and this is really important and a lot of people don't get it. Universities with industry and with governments are the primary leaders in any kind of research for novel therapies. You know, all of our medical schools are very, very big on novel therapies, and the research that goes behind helping humanity, but be well and have more well-being. And at the moment, a lot of attention is being paid to this beast called COVID. And as you know, the university sector is in dire strife because of the reduction of international students and our reliance upon international students to help fund our universities. Now, most of the money and the reliance on international students allows us to do world-class research. The government over the last 30 years has declined our funding model from the 1990s, where they almost funded us to 100%, all the way through to now, where some of our funding is anywhere between 40 and 60% of what it costs to run our universities. So, of course, we picked that up on the international student fees, and over the last 18 months, we haven't been able to rely on that. And we're hit now, but the pipeline of international students who enrolled in first year last year or first year this year that will go on and be with us for 3 to 5 years is reduced. So it's going to really hit us in a couple of years. So our ability to be able to do world-class research and continue to be a research sector that you're proud of and that I'm proud of is going to be very, very hard to maintain. And as you know, we have been world leaders in medical research, and it's really important for us to actually also exert our micro-leadership abilities and write to our local members and ask them, please, to recognise universities as industry in need. Third largest industry in Australia is the export industry of education. What that means and translates to is international students. So that's just something I wanted to say to that. So that was a tricky question, but thank you for that.
I think one more, we've got time for one more question. If anyone has one more question.
We do.
Anybody else?
Are there any other comments on the, I can't see the, oh, here we go, chat. I've got the chat up now.
Yeah.
Have travelled recently in the Kimberley and stayed for a few days in Kununurra. Oh, it's beautiful up there, isn't it? They have an Aboriginal health and wellbeing service called the One Foundation. It's highly applauded by our guide. Yes, absolutely. I was very impressed by the number of people who spoke so well about this service. Yes, absolutely. You're absolutely quite right. And there's lots of services like that. There's a mob that I love, and in any other time I would recommend them as well. It's the Aboriginal Literacy Foundation, and they teach kids to read, but they don't teach the children to read, they teach the grandparents to read. So the grandparents can express their agency by reading children's books to their grandkids, and that's how they teach the kids to read, by teaching the grannies to read, which is really pretty solid stuff. So there's some absolutely fantastic things. How to engage with the vaccine hesitance. So thank you for that. Comment on vaccines, major problems. The vaccines aren't, yeah, look, that's right. And here's another story from my local Woolies. I shop there once a week, right? We go there with our backpacks and we march in and we march out. But, you know, there was another one that its one was saying, you know, it's all these young people having their parties, you know, they should be vaccinated. But until recently, the vaccine rollout wasn't available to them, you know, so we've just got to be careful about not blaming groups of people at this time. You know, we can do the post-mortem afterwards, but right now we just have to get on and get that task done. So thank you very much. Is there any more information about how likely it is to pick up the virus from surfaces in places like supermarkets? Yeah, that's a tricky one, isn't it? I told a bloke off the other day for, you know, touching fruit and putting it back and touching more fruit and putting it back. I said, can you just eyeball it, please? Go on your Target and just grab it and leave. Yeah, so it's quite funny. So I use a little plastic bag, you know, to touch stuff, and then I carefully wash it when I get home. You know, there's sanitation points at most supermarkets. Please take your own sanitizer in your pocket. Yes, you can get it from surfaces. Yes, we know that. That's why there's so much wiping down of things. So try and resist touching everything. I know some of us love touching stuff, but yeah, try and resist it. You know, if you're getting a packet of pasta, you know, don't touch it and then put it back. You know, if you touch it, then I think you should claim it, make it yours. Pretty important. Yeah, we do actually wipe down most stuff, but we just wipe it down, not with anything like an antiseptic or anything. I don't want to do that. But a washer that has just got soap and water in it, because soap is very effective against the virus. Soap busts open the little beastie's membrane. Boom. Okay, so you kill it with soap. The other thing about this, actually, it's a really good question. Because it's triggered this whole line of stuff. Everyone relies on hand sanitizer. hand sanitizer is good when you don't have soap and water. Soap and water is the best practice. So when you get home, use soap and water to wash your hands. It'll be kinder on your hands as well, and dry your hands thoroughly. When you go out and you're lurking around, and just use the hand sanitizer, but always make sure you also regularly wash your hands with soap and water, not just after you've been Jillawa, but, you know, the other times. So, yeah, great questions, everybody. I hope that was helpful.
That was incredibly helpful. So I will... both Bella and Jack, who are the co-chairs, weren't available today, unfortunately. So I am now doing the vote of thanks as well. I'll just double up.
Oh, you're fantastic. But you don't need to thank me. It's me who needs to thank you for the opportunity of coming and talking. I love talking to you, Mob. I felt very at home and very well looked after when I came down and visited you in Melbourne. And I just can't wait until we can see each other again. So can I give the vote of thanks to you, Jackie? And can I give the vote of thanks to every single person that's in this room, because you are the solution. You are the solution. You know, you are articulate, you're intelligent, you've got some time, you've got some resources, you've got a mouth, you know how to ask questions, you know how to go to the hard places with people, you're well connected, you've got fantastic networks, you know. So it's me who thanks you for the opportunity of being able to share just some wandering thoughts of mine. And please stay in touch. You know, Jackie's got my email. I don't mind if, you know, through her you guys get in touch with me to have a yarn. And thank you so much for all of your efforts and supports. You're just amazing. I'm very proud to be a part of your community.
Thank you so much. Can you put me on your list of 5 calls a day?
Yeah, sure. I'll whack you on one. It'll come out of the blue. All right, everybody.
Well, thank you, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll be back next week. We've got an amazing tour for all of you next week to Central Israel. Lisa, you're welcome to come along.
Oh,
it's a
Jackie,
virtual
Lisa, it's
yes.
Deirdre. I'm thrilled to have
Deirdre.
heard you again. Hi, girls.
Hi.
It's Deirdre. Anyway, it was great to see you looking so well up there. Anyway, fantastic. Jackie, when are we doing the South African thing?
Pardon?
I'll go now.
When's the
Bye,
South
everybody.
African thing?
Oh, that will be next time. We're going to do Israel next week. We'll do a South African thing as well, for sure.
Okay, because it sounds different and interesting.
Okay, I'll make sure to do that as well. But we seem to have a couple of weeks still to go. So
and a few more.
Yes, please send suggestions, and I'll do that with pleasure. And thank you so much, everyone, for joining and for being here, and you know, making the lockdown so much more pleasant and supportive. And we get beautiful speakers like Lisa to come and join us. So hope to see you all next week. The tour will be amazing. It really is a fantastic tour. You feel like you're there. And please stay well and see you soon. Bye.